Oh, hi guys. How are you today? It's Friday afternoon, happy hour time. Welcome to the Happy Hour Live webcast from WhiskyCast.com. For those of you who don't know what one of these things is, when I was a kid, we used to call these a Viewmaster. And this came in a press kit today from Heaven Hill because they opened up the new Heaven Hill Bourbon Experience, the revamped Visitors Center in Bardstown, Kentucky, a few weeks ago. And they sent this along and little 3D images and sort of try to show you here what I'm looking at. Yeah, it's not perfect and you can't see the 3D because I can only get the camera up to one eyeball. But this is going to be one of those days, gang, where I'm going to need your help. For the first time since we started doing these webcasts back in March of last year when the pandemic started, I'm flying solo today. I was not able to get a guest booked because a bunch of people that I contacted were out on vacation or doing other things or had business meetings and real world jobs that required them to be busy right now. So they were not able to join us today. So this is going to be the first and quite possibly the last Ask Mark Anything webcast where you guys get to ask the questions and you can ask them in the chat rooms. And I'm going to do something. I've never done this before, I guarantee you. Stand by for just a second here because I'm going to give you guys who are watching at the start of this show, excuse me, the actual link to become guests on the show. If you want to click this link, if you have a Chrome browser and a webcam and a microphone turned on, you can actually cut this link and copy it into your browser window in preferably another browser window and try to come into the screen and try to come into the control room and we'll bring you in to ask your question. Just a reminder that if you do come on the air, make sure you're muted before I bring you into the room. Otherwise, we are going to have echo problems like you will not believe. So here is, whoops, that's not it. That's the link, StreamYard.com/R2D19N96ME. So that's the link. I'll leave that up for a minute or two here, and we'll get to some of the early on questions and comments. Graham Fraser from Scotland, I believe, or England, or in Edinburgh tonight. I'm sorry, Graham. Evening, friends. Having an enjoyable evening dramming here in Edinburgh. Sadly, it came to an end at last orders at 10 o'clock, but fortuitously, that's when WhiskyCast starts. Nurse Dave's Shaving World, first question of the night. Easy ones. Favorite guest that keeps escaping you, and why no WhiskyCast merch? Well, the last one's the easiest one. We haven't found anything that we think you all would want to buy, frankly, and I got enough on my plate without trying to run a fulfillment center too, because if you guys depend on me to get stuff shipped out of here, you might actually get it in 6 months to a year. I've still got some folks waiting for Club of the Month classes from a couple of 3 months ago, just because I haven't had the chance to get to either the post office to get them shipped or to our storage unit to get them out of the storage unit. Favorite guest. Really don't have any favorites. There are folks I love having on the show from time to time, but as far as having a favorite, I don't think that would be fair to say, but guest that keeps escaping. Bob Delgarno, who was the whiskey maker for years at the Macallan, I've been trying to get him on the show for 15 years. Could never do it when he was at the Macallan. Now he's at the Glen Turret, and he still keeps ducking me. He does not like to do interviews. He prefers to let his whiskeys do the talking. I swear we're going to get him on the show one of these days. If I have to go over there and stick a microphone in his face personally, we're going to make that happen. Let's see other questions here. Nurse Dave, I suggest Mark enjoy one dram from each of his shelves during the live today. That is not going to happen, largely because I don't want to wind up in rehab. I don't think I can handle that one off of each shelf. At Pete Head, what's in your glass? Reason I'm interested. Right now, I'm drinking some Glenrothes 18-year-old. I had a couple of minis that were sent as samples that I'd already done the tasting notes for, so I opened those up right now. So a Glenrothes 18 is what's in the glass right now. And Nurse Dave, is this a test for the world's greatest communicator? No guest. 1. Obviously, we're not talking about me here because I know I'm not the world's greatest communicator. Just ask my family about that one. Nurse Dave also wants to know how the pets are doing. Let's give them some screen time. We'll see if they happen to turn up down here. We might give them some screen time. If you look really closely, you'll see my dueling scars up here and down my cheek from where the kittens got me the other night in bed, Char and Stave. The little knuckleheads decided it would be fun to wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning by clawing at my face. So if they come down this way, we will do something right now. Let's see here. BB Dude 1988, catching my first event live. Cheers from the West Coast. Still have a few hours of work, so haven't poured a dram yet. Welcome. I like that idea. Crump the Cask Hole. I want a WhiskyCast Glencairn. Yeah, you and a lot of folks, Crump. What we've done is to make that exclusive, you have to be a member of the Whiskey Club of the Month because we send our Club of the Month winner. And subtly here, thanks for the setup, we will be announcing our next Club of the Month winner on our next episode of WhiskyCast, this coming Monday, the August 2nd episode. But we want to make it exclusive. And once again, I don't have the time or the fulfillment skills to ship glassware all over the place. It's a little small operation around here, and unfortunately, the kids all grew up and moved out, so I can't rely on child labor anymore. So we can't send the glasses out. But if you run into me at a whiskey festival, when those resume, then I do occasionally tuck a couple of those into my gear bag for people who ask. Nurse Dave is busy tonight. Crump and I are a tasting club of 2. Do we win? No. You don't. Nice try, guys. Let's see. Greg's Whiskey Guide. Is it a Q&A theme tonight? Yes, it most certainly is. Your questions are here. Nice note. And this is what I love about our community, that we've developed this thing. Watchman 999. BB Dude 1988. Welcome to the live. I'll pour an extra dram in my glass to celebrate and cover the one you can't pour. And Crump, Nurse Dave is also saying Crump the Cask Hole. Me too, and his shirts. Those we don't make available to anybody. I think maybe 1 or 2 in-laws have them, and a couple of close friends of the show who've been around for years may have a WhiskyCast sweater or something. We've never wanted to sell those, largely because, once again, I'm not a fulfillment house, and we've always had trouble finding stuff that we actually thought was worthy of, that you guys might want to pay for. I get shirts like this primarily to wear at whiskey festivals and stuff like that, and when I'm on trips. But we never really intended those for sale. Speaking of trips, as we're doing the questions here, I just got back. I went on my first whiskey trip since DramFest 2020 in March of last year this week. Spent the last 3 days with the folks at Jack Daniel's Distillery down in Lynchburg, Tennessee. I was their guest, full disclosure, and we'll have Nelson Eddy, their historian, on the show this weekend, clearing up some of the myths and misconceptions and historical questions about the real Jack Daniel and the origins of Jack Daniel's. But spent 3 days down there in the sun, the woods, an Airstream trailer for a night, which I dearly loved. It was 100 degrees there yesterday with heat warnings all over the place, but I wouldn't have traded it for anything, and I do want to thank my friends down there. Got to have just a little bit of fun, though. If you've been on a distillery tour, you know that trick the distillers and the warehouse guys use, where they bang a hammer on either side of the bung to force it out by pressure? Well, sometimes it doesn't always quite work. And here's an example from yesterday with Jack Daniel's master distiller, Chris Fletcher. Watch and enjoy.
Hit the bone. Wow. There. Yeah. There we go.
Just a bit of fun there. It doesn't work all the time. that's why they keep extra bungs around the warehouses to put one back in when they open up a cask for you to taste in the warehouse. H. Hemphill, what do you think about the Norland glasses? I assume you're talking about the neat glasses. They look cool. Not certain they present the nose better than Glencairn's, and I would agree with you on that. I think they're too wide for me. They're wider than this 2th glass, and the Glencairns, of course, come straight up. They don't have this lip. I like the 2th glasses, and I like the Glencairns. I'm not as much a fan of the Norland or neat glasses, or especially rocks glasses. And as Watchman 999 notes, yes, he bunged that one up. And Greg's Whiskey Guide, bung finish, LOL. Let's see, I like this question. Matt, do you have a favorite beer? I don't really have a favorite beer. The one I've tasted recently that I really enjoyed was the 1944 Pilsner from Kings Road Brewing, a few blocks from here in Haddonfield, our one sort of thing that makes us a not quite almost dry town anymore. Really enjoyed that one. Nice and lemony. I wish they'd make more of it. I went through like 3 or 4 crowlers of this thing while it was out, but I don't really have favorites on that. Oh, and but just like I don't have a favorite whiskey, my comment statement there is I haven't found it yet. And Watchman 99, oh, finally, I see what a 2th glass looks like. That's what they look like. What makes them unusual is that bottom triangular shape. So that's what, let's see here. What would you say is the best bargain in the whiskey world? I would look for some of the bottled in bond bourbons out of Kentucky. You find some things like Evan Williams bottled in bond that you can get for $20 still a bottle, even with whiskey prices going up. And that whiskey is really good. I mean, it's hard to find bad whiskey these days. It's easy to overlook things. I mean, even for instance, Jack Daniels, a lot of folks will turn their noses up at it, but I got to admit, I kind of liked getting back to that, to regular old number 7, along with the Gentleman Jack, some of the other whiskeys that are in the Jack range, the single barrel and whiskeys like that. I really enjoy those. And along with the Tennessee Tasters whiskeys, it's really just try something, even if you just order it at a bar. Just try the value whiskeys and see what you like and see what really appeals to you. David Owen, Mark, what was your first single malt and do you still like and buy it? That's a tricky question because I don't know what it was. I've told this story on a couple of podcasts, but first time I tried single malts, I was down in Sarasota, Florida at the little tasting room that Michael's on East used to run. And they're the folks that hosted the Whiskey Obsession Festival for many years in Sarasota each spring. I went in there one night. I was down there on family business, taking care of my grandmother's estate. And they were running a flight of single malts that night. And I went in, said, okay, let's give this a try. Put my card down on the counter and said, okay, let's try it. And the bartender pours 4 single malts from different regions of Scotland. And I tasted the differences immediately, liked them, but I never found out what whiskeys they were. So I may have had at least one of them a lot over the years, but I got to admit, I can't tell you. And that's a real shame. Spirit Bomb, what's your best dad joke? I'm going to bring in Matt because Matt is out in Los Angeles with my daughter, Tessa, who's watching this from UCLA tonight. Matt, could you please turn your phone sideways so we can eliminate all that black space on the side? Turn it to landscape mode. Oh, that was effective. Okay. Tessa, you can hear us, right? Nope, so you're muted. There. You guys have to unmute yourselves. Please click the unmute button down on the bottom. I can hear you now, Matt. So, Tessa, any comments on my best dad joke? Other than when I look in the mirror.
Oh, I'm just trying to recall a bunch of painful Thanksgivings. I don't know. But
Thanks.
Matt should probably offer up. Oh no, it's like all jokes all the time. At Thanksgiving, do you have any good dad jokes, Matt?
Not on the spot.
Yeah, I know. I don't think we realized that we were going to be on.
Well, I don't think so either. But while you're here, I want you to tell the story, Tess, of your 21st birthday in Boston.
Oh. Dear.
And the trip to the liquor store.
That story. So 21st birthday in Boston, was attending Boston College at the time, and there's really nothing that funny about this story. I don't know if you've even heard it. Although because I did have a New Jersey ID, the person checking IDs at the time was convinced that I had a fake ID and went to check it, and all I could think of is, why would I make my fake ID today as my birthday? Because that doesn't seem like a particularly effective fake ID. Although I will say I did find someone who I lived with in college is her fake ID when she was underage, and she had her birth date listed in the 1940s, so it wasn't a particularly good fake ID. I don't know if they checked that hard.
But what happened when you bought your first bottle, and what was it? And tell us what happened.
Oh, well, I bought a bottle of Redbreast 12 because you probably should have sent me one. And
you were underage. It would have been illegal.
No, I meant for my birthday. I think it's a sin that I ever have to buy whiskey on my own, given how much is downstairs. But yeah, I bought a bottle of Redbreast 12, and I have recommended Redbreast 12, 15, and 21 countless times to many people for gifts for professors and boyfriends and dads and all of that to my friends. So that's probably what you'll find on my shelf, except with a very almost empty bottle of Jameson, because Matt's learning how to drink whiskey, so we're starting there.
Yep.
He asked last night about how long you can keep a bottle of whiskey open. I don't know if you can answer that.
Yeah, you can. Basically, as long as the seal is closed, and you can't leave it open, but as long as the cork is still in it, I mean, we've had this bottle of Redbreast 12 Cask-Strength for a long time. Yeah, no, you can't. It's not like wine. Whiskey, you can leave in the bottle as long as it's sealed up. It'll last for. I've got stuff down here that has been opened that has been around for years. As long as you take good care of it and make sure it gets sealed, you can make it work.
What's the off limits whiskey that you'd be really annoyed if we got into one Christmas? Something that you don't want to necessarily share with the fam. Any favorites?
That's the bottle I mentioned with. That's the bottle that has Frizzle on it. Our sheepdog downstairs. Remember the Enoch bottle with Frizzle?
I have never seen that.
Oh yeah, you have. I've showed it to you. It's the one that they did with the Peter Arkell from Enoch. The illustrator did the caricature with Frizzle on it, with me sitting in the laying in the hammock with Frizzle. And that's the only one, because I can never replace that one. Anything else I can probably replace or get something close to it. You guys open that one, there will be blood spilled, because I can never replace that one.
Yeah.
Okay, Matt, what you had a question? I know off in the private area, in the chat area. What was your question?
Oh yeah, I was just curious. Again, as Tessa mentioned, I'm just getting into the whiskey stuff, and I know very little. But one thing that's always kind of perplexed me are the age statements on whiskey bottles, and how it seems like some whiskey brands don't even include it. I'm just kind of curious why that might be the case, and also like what goes into determining what the age statement ultimately is for those that do include it on their bottles. Kind of curious about that. If you could clarify that for me, that'd be great.
Well, there's two different areas. First of all, is outside of the United States, age statements are completely optional. But if you include it, it is always the youngest whiskey that goes into that bottle. For instance, this Glenfarclas 18 I'm drinking right now, and this is just my little sample bottle with the 18 age statement. Every barrel that went into this bottle has to be at least 18 years old. Now, in the U.S., if you use an age statement, anything under 4 years old is required to have an age statement by law, because it's considered young whiskey, and they want you to, and the government wants you to know that you're getting young whiskey. And so it requires it anything under 4 years. Over 4 years, you don't have to include it. But if you do, then once again, it has to be the youngest whiskey in that bottle.
Oh, okay. So if
And there's no requirement that you, outside the U.S., that you include an age statement.
Oh, okay. Okay. So if you had like an 18-year-old whiskey in there mixed in with a 16-year-old one, the age statement would ultimately be 16 then?
Correct. Correct.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
I did tell him I could answer that one too, just so you know.
What? I know you could
I
have
did
answered
tell
it
him
for him.
I wanted to hear it directly from the expert, though.
Ooh.
Do you have a favorite daughter?
I love all three of you equally, Tessa.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you soon. Love you, sweetie.
Love you. Bye.
Bye. Tessa and Matt out in Los Angeles. Tessa taking time off before medical school classes resume to jump in with some questions along with Matt. Let me bring in our pal Chris Ratcliffe from England right now. Chris, how are you tonight?
I'm very well, Mark. Very well. Thanks for having me back on again. I think my third time now.
Something like that, yeah. But what questions do you have, or what's bugging you about whiskey these days?
Mostly that I don't have enough of it, and that I am trying. My lockdown kind of promise was to try and open all the bottles that I've collected, that I've put on the back of cupboards and shelves and all over. So to that end, I've got the Amrit Fusion open tonight, which is which says 2011 on the back, which probably says a lot about how long I've had it. But one thing I did want to talk about, for as long as I've been listening to WhiskyCast, you've always been selling photo prints, and you've been putting photos up on the website, up on social media.
Right.
And you shared some from Jack Daniel earlier today as well. How do you approach whiskey photography? How do you find those images while presumably you're also on a tour and a tasting and making notes and learning and everything else that goes on during a distillery trip?
It's tricky to do. I'm carrying usually a camera on one strap, carrying a recorder, carrying a microphone. I may have the video camera on a second neck strap around my neck, and I'm juggling basically to try to get everything in without slowing the rest of the group down too much. This trip was fun because it had been the first time I'd been to a distillery in a year and a half. So it was just fun to get out there and take some photos. Let's see here. I don't have it on this computer, unfortunately. But if you look at the social media feed, you'll see the photo from the flames that let me see here. Just a second. Let's just pull this one up, because I'm really proud of this photo.
So while you're looking for that, what is it that you're actually looking for? What makes a good whiskey or distillery image for you?
I want something that speaks to the distillery. I want something that shows me something about what is unusual about that distillery. And there's the picture. We're trying to share. That's the sugar maple charcoal bonfire that they used to create the charcoal for their Lincoln County process mellowing. They don't go down to the store and pick up a bunch of charcoal briquettes like we'd use for a barbecue. Several times a week, they set their own bonfire.
And it's a big bonfire.
Oh yeah, that's just the top end of it. And just a second here, we can actually, because I can show you the video of at least part of that. Just a second here. You can see some of that, but that's just the top end right now. So we will come back to that. So that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for, something that makes the distillery unusual, that sets it apart, where if you look at that image, you can see it really tells you what the distillery is. Hopefully you'll identify it from the spot. a lot of pagodas on the distilleries in Scotland all look the same. But if you know what you're looking for instance, you look at Strathisla, there's 2 pagodas, and it's easy to tell some of these distilleries apart. But I really want to try to find something that speaks to that distillery when I'm looking for a photo. There's a photo I've not edited yet, and I don't have it on this computer to show you. Chris Fletcher, the master distiller. I love shooting portraits of distillers in their natural environment. And Wednesday, I shot a photo of Chris Fletcher, literally a tight portrait of him head and shoulders standing in front of all those flames from that bonfire, because that process is something that really defines Jack Daniel's. So that's why I picked that photo to shoot. Fortunately, we have had some dad jokes come in, and thanks to everybody for submitting these. For instance, from Tabitha, a man's wife decided to become a whiskey maker. He loved her still. Ba-dum-bump. Also from Tabitha, I'm on a whiskey diet. I've lost 3 days already. Boy, from Whiskey Canuck in Canada. I have a good joke for Gen Zers and millennials about Social Security, but they probably won't get it, nor will anybody else outside the country. Chris, you want to share the one you posted?
So mine was 2 fish in a tank. One says to the other, "How do you drive this thing?" There's also I am now a dad, so I'm now allowed to do all of these. So
Yeah.
I went to see a child psychologist. He was rubbish. He was 7, and my personal favorite was there was a fire at an Alphabetti spaghetti factory. Said it could explode, and if it did, that could spell disaster.
And there was a new. I saw one the other day, and I know I'm probably not going to get. I should give somebody who I wish I knew who to give this credit to, but let's see, a minister, a priest, and a rabbit walk into the bar, and the rabbit goes, "I'm sorry, I'm only here because of the autocorrect." From Watchman 989, why should you always invite arthritis out to drink? It knows how to close down a joint. Oy.
I want to go back, Mark, to one of the questions from earlier in the show, which I think was probably Nurse Dave who did all of them. And thank you, Nurse Dave, for your comments on my accent. It's a complete and utter fallacy. If you had a time machine and you could do a WhiskyCast interview with somebody from history who's no longer with us, who would you want to go back and interview?
That's a great question. One of the people I never got to interview, because I started WhiskyCast the year after he died, was the late, great Booker No. I would love to go back. I wish I could have talked to Booker. I think that would be a great, fun interview. Now, if you want to go back in time, I want to go back and talk to somebody like Aeneas Coffey or Friar John Core, and try to get some of the idea of where, especially with somebody like a Friar John Core, to find out, okay, who actually started this stuff? Where did it come from? And who taught Friar John Core how to distill whiskey, for crying out loud? Here's the fun thing. I would love to go back, and speaking of this week's interview or trip to Jack Daniel's, I would love to go back and talk to Jack Daniel himself, because one of the things that nobody knows is why he hung the old No. 7 brand on Jack Daniel's whiskey. There was another story about that hit the wires today, hit the web today on the internet, one of these aggregator sites. The biggest mystery about Jack Daniel's, and nobody at Jack Daniel's knows the answer, seriously, of old No. 7. They say it was his 7th girlfriend, although, as somebody pointed out on the trip, if you name old No. 7 after your 7th girlfriend, she probably isn't going to be your girlfriend for long. So let's see here.
Or his distiller's license.
There's been some talk about that too, because originally it was Distillery District No. 7 or something like that. But let's see, Andrew Bedford, what do you call a man with a map on his head? Miles? Ooh, I like this one. Greg's Whiskey Guide would be Alfred Barnard. That would be a good one.
Definitely.
And Greg says, oh, so none of the stories are true? We don't know whether the stories are true. They could all be true. I have a theory about it that I can't repeat on a webcast. I can't repeat it in polite company. Hell, I can't even tell anybody else about it because I'll get in trouble. But it's just sort of a warped little theory I came up with. But anything. Go ahead.
Isn't there a point, Mark, though, where we're lucky now in a way that we can talk to the people who start up, New Riff or Ardnahoe or any of these distilleries that are opening, and we can actually say to them, why here, why now, why that spirit, why that still. But there is so much history. You look at Arbeg or Lefroy that have recently celebrated their 200th anniversary. How do you, and I can think of a number of others like Jack Daniels or Heaven Hill or many, many others. How do you as a journalist filter out the marketing and the PR and the myth and the legend from the story and the facts that you want to portray?
That is basic journalism, just asking the questions and having a really good bullshit detector. Let's see. More great jokes here. And folks who are saying Alfred Bernard, and I got a question from upstairs. Who is Alfred Bernard? Alfred Bernard wrote probably the definitive whiskey book of the 1890s. I believe it was the Whiskey Distilleries of the United Kingdom, or Great Britain and the United Kingdom. Basically the first travel book of its kind, because he went around to literally every distillery of that day and visited, talked, sampled, put tasting notes in, and told the stories of every single distillery that was operating in Scotland, Ireland at the time, because it was before the Irish Civil War, so it was still all part of the United Kingdom. And he told the stories of all those distilleries. And a first edition of the Barnard book is priceless. I want it for Christmas. Hint, hint, hint. Let's see. Spirit Bomb. And as I was just noted from upstairs, for those who do not know, not me, you idiot. Okay. So... And Watchman 99, I'd like to talk to Elijah Craig and ask him if he had whiskey before he preached. Actually, I would love to talk to Elijah Craig and ask him if he was the first one who thought about charring the barrels on the inside. We could solve a lot of those myths with a great time machine. What are you working on these days, Chris, besides all of the crypto stuff that you do?
Always good fun. One day, Mark, I think you and I need to crack open a bottle, and I will teach you blockchain and all of that good stuff.
Oh hell, I don't have enough bottles to learn that.
I also run another podcast. So those of you who don't know, I also do a podcast called the Auto Movie Podcast, where I talk about films and TV and YouTube videos with cars in them, effectively. And me and my best friend, we get together once every couple of weeks and talk about the things that we love and the things that bring us together. And we're going through, I think, kind of the same problem with as you at the moment, Mark, that a lot of people are either traveling at races or on holiday. So hoping to get some more interviews done on that later in the year. The other thing as well is that I'm looking at how the UK whiskey industry is opening up. So for those who watch, who don't know, July the 19th was called Freedom Day by some people, and it was the day when all of our COVID restrictions magically lifted. And I will leave the commentary there. And I've started seeing distilleries now, the tour capacities are going up. The shows that were possibly looking a bit dubious seem to be firming up. I've even
got a note today about the Liverpool Whiskey Festival. They're going ahead with it September 18th.
Yes. I've got some friends up there, and we're hoping to make a trip. And the even my local distillery, the White Peak Distillery, are having a outdoor booze and barbecue night, 28th of August, I think. So it's all just starting to come together a bit more now, and to just to open up. And it's interesting seeing how people are dealing with the restrictions, what people are saying about mask wearing and things like that. I was actually down in London last week, around the area where the Whisky show is going to happen in October. And it's kind of eerie in London because people aren't there working. A lot of foreign tourists aren't there. And it's getting busier, but it's still surprisingly quiet for July. So I think come October, I think it could be really interesting to see who can travel, whether borders are open and closed and what have you. And I think we'll start actually seeing events happening and people coming together. And I think there's a lot of caution. I think people are obviously keen that their events go ahead. We've seen, for example, the British Grand Prix was full stands, and it's one of the first sporting events we've had this year. But the organizer said if that hadn't happened, the circuit would have essentially been bankrupt. So I think we're getting there. We're getting there slowly, and I think people are being cautious. They're being responsible. And looking forward to more events, getting to meet people again. I think it's been too long since you've been able to meet people and shake hands and share a drink and share stories. So hopefully more of that. And also, of course, working on more ideas for WhiskyCast. So there'll be certainly more from me coming on here too.
Yeah, I have to admit, though, flying home and being down in Tennessee, where there's been a lot of concern about vaccination rates and vaccination levels and mask wearing and stuff, I can tell you that Jack Daniel Distillery is going to go back to requiring masks for its visitors starting this coming week because they had a COVID case in-house. I'm not sure if it was a vaccinated case or a regular COVID case, but they are going to go back to requiring masks for visitors again. And I mean, I sat in the Nashville airport. I wore a mask most of the time when I could, when I needed to, around when I was indoors during the trip. But especially in the airport, and I'm looking at people who weren't wearing masks, and it was hard not to say, put your damn mask on, for crying out loud. And because, and there's one other picture I will share with you from the social media feed just a second here, because I shot this on Wednesday at the distillery during the tour. And just a second here. I got some comments on this one because somebody pointed out that Jack wouldn't wear a mask. And I'm going, oh, the hell, no, Jack's not stupid. Jack would have worn a mask.
Jack was filtering before most people were, to such a great extent.
Brilliant. I hadn't even thought of that. If he's filtering the whiskey through charcoal, he's damn well going to wear a mask. Chris, I never made that connection. That is frigging brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to steal that.
Please do. And Greg, in the chat, just looking, we've had more people talking about time travel interviews. He was talking about interviewing Taketsuru-san, who was really sort of the start of the Japanese whiskey industry. And he said, the problem is his Japanese is limited. Don't forget that Taketsuru learned his distilling craft in Glasgow. He came over, I think, in 1923, if my memory serves.
Yeah, something like that.
He ordered equipment. He worked with the people in the distilleries. His wife, I think, was Scottish. So I think, yeah. So I think I don't think the language barrier would be an issue there.
Those who know Glaswegians, and I say this with all love, could say they probably couldn't understand him in two different languages. I kid, of course. And as Tabitha points out, can pie is the only word you need to know. Chris Tedzenko, our buddy down in Australia, who's not getting to come up for the Kentucky Bourbon Festival this year. What did you do for National Scotch Day last Tuesday? I flew down to Tennessee to drink Tennessee whiskey. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I had to get on a plane in the morning, and I was drinking cold beer and Tennessee whiskey in Nashville, where it was 100 degrees Fahrenheit all week long. We have a question here that's right up your alley. I'm going to ask you to explain this because you are the F1 nut around here. I understand you to a certain extent. What do you think of sprint qualifying? F1. I didn't get to watch the last time they tried it, so at the British GP.
So just to quickly explain what it is, normally in a Grand Prix weekend, you have 3 practice sessions. You then have qualifying where it's largely fastest lap sets the grid order, fastest guy at the front, and so on. And then that sets the order for the race. What they tried for the British Grand Prix, the last Grand Prix 2 weeks ago, was they had 1 practice session, then they had a 17-lap race that set the order for the Grand Prix. There's missed a step out of the middle there. But yeah, so essentially it was a 17-lap race that then set the grid for the race on Sunday. What did I think to it? I thought it was an interesting experiment. I think if you're trying to make things more exciting, putting the fastest guys at the front of the race doesn't always seem like the most interesting way to spice it up. But I think one thing that it did show, I think we've had a lot of back-to-back Formula One races, by which I mean races at the same venue in consecutive weeks, is that when you have 2 races close together, people learn from the first one and that impacts the second one. I think more racing and less practice is good. I think that the sprint qualifying really led to the Hamilton-Verstappen crash on the first lap of the full race, which people are still talking about, and the fallout from which has been immense and continues to roll on.
What's your take on that one? Because I thought it was a racing incident.
Yes, 100%. I think one of the pundits said either guy could have backed out, and you've got the young challenger. For those probably parents who've watched the Cars 3 movie, you'll know the story. Lewis Hamilton is the incumbent. He is the current classic, the potentially the greatest of all time. And you've got Max Verstappen, who's the young, up and coming, and they're each trying to make the mark on each other. This is how I talk about car movies all the time. And you've now got this situation where Lewis is having to up his game to try and stay on top. You've got Max who's trying to make his name. You've got Max has always been quite an aggressive, quite a forceful driver. And Lewis said for the first time, I think because he's older, he's a bit more experienced, he tends to say, he thinks of the long game. He thinks of the championships, thinks of the points. He went, nope, not this time. You're not going to turn in. I'm going to hold my line. If you hold your line, you're going to crash. Both of them thought that. They both could have backed out. It's a racing incident. And I think some of the vitriol and frankly, some of the tactics that have come out of it since, particularly from the Red Bull team, are just awful. And I think they don't deserve a place in Formula One, frankly.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of references to Karen Horner on Twitter
That's been my favorite. So he said, and this is the last thing I'll say because I realize this is a whiskey podcast, not a Formula One podcast. He was interviewed today. I think it was today. And there's video of this going around. And they said, what did you think of Lewis Hamilton after the crash was getting racial abuse on Twitter? And he said, it's absolutely, it's not the right thing. We condemn it. It has no place. By the way, Max got abused too. Let's not forget that. And I'm like, hang on. You're this tone deaf that it always has to be about you. You always have to be the victim here. And I think like I say, I don't think it does the sport any service at all. I think there's some great lines. If you've watched Drive to Survive, I said I'd stop talking about this. I will in a minute.
No, it's okay.
If you watch Drive to Survive on Netflix, if you have no interest in racing, it's a fantastic series because it's all about the people. And somebody made the observation that after the first series, Christian Horner had this kind of elevated role. So he's the team boss of the Red Bull racing team. And they had this vision of him going to dinner parties in Chipping Norton where like Jeremy Clarkson and various politicians live. And they were going, oh, I saw you on Netflix. Oh, aren't you suave? Aren't you interesting? And he's now thinking like, oh, aren't I wonderful? And everyone else is going, no, just... Anyway. And yes, Crump, you're absolutely right. I think Max has grown up in an environment where he's been told he's the golden boy forever. He's been protected. He's been fast-tracked into teams. And, he's the guy who was shoving other drivers around in Parc Fermé when one hit him. And yeah, one of the interesting things, Mark, and I'd be interested to know what you think about this, because this is one of those cultural differences that in American sport, generally, there seems to be a lot more reverence for the event, for the sport, for the governing body.
Oh, hell no.
You don't think?
No, they bitch about the officiating here just as much as they do over in Formula One.
Fair enough.
Put it this way. I was watching the Stanley Cup final, just because you watch the last games when the cup can be decided, just because when the league commissioner, Gary Bettman, comes out, he's going to get booed. Even if the team that wins the cup wins at home in front of their home fans, they're still going to boo Gary Bettman just because it's tradition. And I mean, it's like WWE almost. Bettman comes out, he's like, yeah, come on, I can't hear you guys. Come on.
So one last thing, just to tie this back, is there a whiskey livery or sponsorship or something like that in sport that you think of and you remember and you think that was a particularly iconic one?
We really haven't had that many. I will give you the last one that really made a difference. We've had a couple in Formula One, but those were during the Vijay Mallya years with Force India.
Yeah.
But we had, I'm trying to remember, I believe it was 2007, Dario Franchitti's first win at the Indianapolis 500. He was driving for Andretti Autosport in the Canadian Club livery. Orange car, Canadian Club was the last time a whiskey sponsor was the lead sponsor on an Indy 500 champion. So, okay, and Graham Fraser says, we got to talk about whiskey or he's going to start to talk about cricket. So, let's get back to whiskey now. No more racing talk. Miroslav in Poland, greetings. Thank you for joining us tonight. Hope you're still with us right now. Chris, what is your take on the whole cask investment market? Blair Bowman had a great piece the other day talking about the pitfalls in cask buying. And I'm just looking at this, I'm going, unless you're buying it to drink it, why bother?
So I think particularly here in the UK, we have incredibly historically low interest rates at the moment. If you put money in the bank, you get next to nothing. And over the last, 8 to 10 years maybe, the idea of alternative investments has just been up through the roof. And the price of sports cars has gone up and all sorts of stuff has gone up as a result. I think that I can remember a time when casks were going up, when I won't name the distillery, but if you had a cask in the warehouse, they would offer you money. They would offer you a premium for it. They would offer you, X many bottles free if they can have the rest. And I think that just became, that one boom became the myth and the legend. I think what we're seeing now is people trading commodities. That's it. They don't care what it is. If they can get 5% on it, if they can get 8%, they'll buy it, they'll store it, they'll sell it. I think there's a problem as I've seen in Blair's pieces. Blair's excellent pieces. What do you do with it? Whiskey has a time limit. It's not like gold. It doesn't keep forever. You've got to find somebody to buy it. You've got to find somebody who's willing to pay you more for it, because otherwise it's not a great investment. And I think that there's probably two markets for a lot of whiskey. I think there are people who are buying and selling for investments. I think there are people who are buying and selling for bottling, for blending, for fun, essentially. And I just think it's a real shame that I think the bubble on the investment side has absolutely from the people that I've spoken to, and I did a piece on this for the podcast a few months ago. People were saying during those chats, it makes it harder to find the good whiskey. It makes it harder to know what one person is selling who, you don't know who they are. Maybe they've got the best cask of Macallan you've ever tasted in your life. Or maybe...
Not bloody likely.
Well, yes. Or it's the stuff that was sat at the back of the warehouse that, some distillery didn't want, so they sold it. And it's just trading on the name. And I think it's a real shame if it puts people off coming together as a club, as a group of friends, enjoying the journey, enjoying the trip of picking your cask, going through the samples, getting the bottles at the end of your whiskey. And I think that there's probably realization more now, and certainly probably in the last 3 or 4 years of distilleries going, we're not going to play in that game. We're going to do more of it ourselves. We're going to control it. We're going to look after it and work with people like Boutique Whiskey Company and others who they can trust and who they can build that relationship with. So I think I heard crypto described as a Ponzi scheme because it all relies on the person after you pay more than you paid. And as long as there's somebody willing to pay more, the ball keeps rolling. I think when interest rates go up, I think when other investments come along, I think there will be people left holding whiskey that they don't know what to do with, that they can't sell, or they sell at a big loss. And I hope that the bubble goes and the market corrects and we can start talking about the whiskey again rather than the returns.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't want people to lose money, but I'm just thinking that at some point this has to come back to reality. I mean,
I've had people talking to me in like the last year saying, I've had bottles that have matured out of a cask that I've had a share in. And the number of people who popped up and said, oh, I've heard there's money in that. Oh, I've thought about buying, my son a cask for his 18th birthday who's just been born. I'm thinking, no, just, buy a nice bottle, hold that for him. If you start playing, it's like playing any other market. At this point, if it was that easy to make money, you and I and all the other people watching this and listening to the podcast, we'd be rolling in it. Unfortunately, I don't know about you, but I'm just happy with my few bottles at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I would love... There are times when, yes, back in 2012 when my grandson was born, when I wish I had the resources to buy a cask and just put it aside, just basically not for investment, but just to say, you know what, this is a kind of a cool thing, and
yeah,
it is what it is. And we'll share it with friends and we'll pass it around, and the grandson will have as many bottles as he wants. And Tabitha, I wish you would jump in here. I gave you the link. Come on, Tabitha. I really want you to get on here. We keep getting these comments about cricket, and I love the comment from Whiskey Canuck in Canada. I have a cricket question. Why? Chris, pop quiz. Best cricket-themed whiskey bottling ever.
No idea. I've never. I know almost nothing about cricket at all. There's got to be one
understand
somewhere.
it. I don't understand it. I don't even pretend to try. And there's questions. Watchman 999 had a great question. So when the whiskey bubble pops, how many distilleries pop with it? That's a really good question. I think we may lose some craft distilleries. Some of these small scale guys who are trying to, depending on selling a bunch of casks from that early production in order to fund their continuing operations. But
I have a feeling that because the craft industry is now so embedded, I think what we'll probably see is, rather than a lot of distilleries just vanish, I think we will see consolidation. I think we will see a new craft whiskey empire grow out of out of the ashes. And I really hope that the places that can't stock enough whiskey because they're selling it all, people will look at that and go, they've got an audience, they've got a market, they've got skills, they've got a flavor profile we like. Let's keep them on board. One thing actually, Mark, while we were talking about the pandemic and traveling again, I think I'm trying to remember if you've done WhiskyCast podcasts from events.
Yes.
Have you ever thought of doing a panel like this at an event? I know you did for was it the Sagamore Spirit Open Day?
Well, we did a panel a tasting panel at the Victoria Whiskey Festival many years ago. And I've had multiple guests on when I was at Sagamore last fall for their Penny's Proof release day. But yeah, we could easily do panel discussions like this at festivals. We've done them before. And it would not be, I mean, that's sort of what we've done with these webcasts over the last year or so is get a bunch of whiskey geeks on and let them go at each other.
There's certainly plenty of whiskey geeks go around, but yes, maybe that's the thing when the shows reopen. We've got the technology. Let's go and do some panel discussions at shows and put a mic out in the audience, and we'll keep the Q&As going.
And Tabitha's going, not a chance that she's going to join us. And Tabitha, come on. If we can do this, you can do it. Matt's going, Tabitha, Tabitha, Tabitha. Come on. Nurse Dave, next week can we talk about curling? No. I kid, of course, but I want to get back to this because, hey, Champill, I'm holding on to my Middleton Dare Greylock first release. Can't afford to drink it. The hell you can't. Drink that sumbitch and make some memories. In all seriousness, yes, it's gained in value. But you know what? You will make far more memories opening that bottle with friends and making memories that will last a lifetime. And you won't have to pay capital gains taxes on it or whatever. And you'll have a lot more fun. Trust me on this. You will never make more of an investment or a more profitable investment than by celebrating with good friends and drinking whiskey with good friends. I mean, hell, Chris and I have never actually had the chance to sit down together and have a proper dram, but at least we can do this.
Cheers to that.
Yep.
I have bottles that I have one bottle that I have had while I've been married through the birth of my child, and it's still unopened, but I've sworn I will never ever sell it. It's being opened. I have guests in mind. And to be honest, I think the one thing that lockdown has really shown me is it's all just stuff at the end of the day. I think if you are collecting because you like to collect, if that's your thing, then fine. But if you're doing it because you think you can't afford to drink it because it's better to have owned and drunk than to never have owned at all.
Yep. Because then you've got the memories of having shared that bottle with friends.
Yep.
I have said over and all the bottles I've got back here, if somebody comes to my house, with the exception of that one bottle I mentioned with Tessa earlier, the Enoch with our old sheepdog Frizzle, who was passed on several years ago, I can't replace that bottle. Anything else in this house, I will open up if somebody really wants to try it. Mm-hmm. And I won't let them mix it with Coke or anything like that, but you got to have fun. Okay. Hemphill got 2 daughter weddings coming up next year, so there's the opportunity.
Congrats.
2 of them? Congratulations, and man, I feel for you.
Good luck.
Congratulations and good luck.
Let me pick a question here. There's been one in the show chat, which is, what's the most unusual note you've ever tasted? And if I had a bit of paper, I would do the sort of the Jeopardy thing, because I bet I can guess what it would be.
Well, it's not vanilla. It's not honey.
I think let me reframe the question slightly, because there are two whiskies that spring to mind that have had very specific finishes, and see if your memory hasn't wiped out the tasting notes of those two.
One of them was a Banyuls, I'm sure of it. The Tullibardine Banyuls finish. God, I still feel like I got to pressure wash my tongue to get the taste of that thing off.
What was, because there was that one, and there was the yes, Tabitha, you're absolutely right. Wet Dog is one of those which,
yep, baby vomit, the butyric note. Yeah, where's that sucker?
Because there was the Tabasco finished whiskey, wasn't there?
Well, yeah, but that was they intended it for that one to be bad. It was the Pabst Blue Ribbon thing that was matured for 5 seconds over wood. I think I had that one around here within reach just for reference purposes, but I can't see it right now, so I'm not even going to keep looking. But yeah.
Is there a note that you do find coming up in whiskies repeatedly, which you either just can't quite put your finger on, or that you don't get on with that well?
Yeah. There's been one I've described it from time to time, and Tyrone Cote points out Band-Aids, and Greg Serafian points out it is a common note, the butyric baby vomit note. Spirit Bomb gets a milk note in Classic Laddie.
Ooh.
Yeah, I get this thing that sometimes it tastes like and noses like anise, sometimes like licorice, sometimes like burnt caramel almost. And it is hard to figure that thing out at times. Let's see. But that would be it. That's one I've had trouble just trying to. Matt, I have never tasted baby vomit. Would not want to either. Obviously, you've never had children, because if you have kids, guaranteed you're going to hit it at some point. Because that kid, you're going to have your mouth open, and the kid is going to projectile vomit at some point. Trust me, I got 3 daughters. I know. Yeah.
I have this vivid memory of holding my son, my shirt sticking to me with baby vomit, and this, not just the smell that lingers, but when I took it off, it's just like,
Yep.
It sticks with you.
Yep. I remember that well. I love this from Graham Fraser. I have a bottle of 1960 Lafroig unopened. It's a piece of whiskey history distilled under Bessie Williamson. So scared I'll be poor, and it's worth a small fortune. Damn it, Graham. I know. I get this. I understand it. I just got to say, I'm still in favor of better you who appreciates this whiskey than some investment banker somewhere who wants to get their hands on this thing and only sees the profit in it.
Yep.
At least you understand that this sucker is 60 years old, has been in the bottle for 60 years. And you've got a chance to drink it. I understand that, but I'm going, damn it, just do it. Just go ahead.
See, I think there are two. I think there are 2 types of people, Mark. There are some people.
But wait.
Sorry, go on.
As Greg points out, wait for me to come there. Absolutely, Graham. I'm on the way. As soon as I can book a ticket, then we can open it. Okay.
What's your address? Let me get a pen.
Yeah.
See, I think there are people who will go to a restaurant and they will always order the steak, or they will always order the same thing because they know what they're getting. And I take the view that I will pick the thing that sounds interesting, or that restaurant is known for. And if it's bad, okay, so be it. If it's great, I got a treat. And if it's weird, I got an experience I would never get anywhere else.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
if it is bad, it's a 60-year-old whiskey, and you've got that experience that not a lot of other people have.
It's just like tasting the Fishkey a few years ago when I was at Bal Blair in the blind tasting with John McDonald. And he snuck that thing in just as a surprise at the end. And I'm going, you know what? I'm still going to get him for doing that. But I'm glad I had the chance to taste it.
Was it completely blind? You had no idea?
I had no idea because he snuck it in at the end of the tasting saying, oh, I got this other one I want you to taste. We're thinking, okay, it's a cask sample or something else from their distillery. And he sneaks this thing in with this grin on his face. And I should have seen that right away because it is that classic shit-eating grin where you know they're about to pull something. And I fell for it. And I tasted this and I was, holy shit. And because that's the reaction he wanted. He wanted the reaction. I gave him the reaction. And I'm just going, you know what? I'm glad I got to taste it, but damn you for screwing me like that. And wait a second. From Greg to Graham Fraser, if you don't have the special occasion you're waiting for, create that occasion is my advice. Absolutely.
Damn right.
Here, whiskey is only whiskey if someone drinks it or intends to drink it. If it's permanently on the shelf, then it's a commodity.
I would add one thing to that, is that if you have a special bottle and you finish it and you share it and you make memories, you've still got the bottle. You've still got that thing that you can put on the shelf and look at, take the top off from time to time, smell it again. And that is that memory. Every time you see it, it'll reinvigorate that memory.
Yep, absolutely. And as Tabitha points out, my last special occasion was Tuesday. Cheers, Tabitha.
And any day with a Y is a special occasion.
You got it. Absolutely. And Greg, I didn't know John was like that. Oh, yeah, he's like that. Yeah. Graham Fraser, what's your unicorn whiskey, Mark? Oh, hell, I don't know. You know what I want to try? Is this, the Macallan, the Sir Peter Blake bottles and the really old Macallans that are the ones that are going for $1 million? I want to try one of those just once to see if it's really worth all that money.
Or is it like the $1,000 burger in Vegas? Is it just expensive for the sake of being expensive?
Yeah, exactly. I want to try that. And I'm thinking it's the 1926 Macallan. I want to try just one to see if it really is all that. I don't think it is. Tyrone Coty. What's the best, most fun recent marketing campaign you have seen? Offerman and Lagavulin? Yeah. Gotta admit, the Viewmaster thing here was kind of fun. I did not expect to find a Viewmaster when I opened the box.
Were you there going, this is a bit light for a bottle?
Oh, no, because the full bottle was in there.
Okay.
No, the full bottle was in there, and hang on a split second here. Let me see if I can reach it. It is just out of reach. So I can't show it to you, but they did send the full bottle. But finding a Viewmaster in there was kind of cool. I got to admit, I haven't seen one of these since I was a kid. And I didn't even buy one of these for my grandson because I figured he wouldn't. Kid's into Nintendo Switch. He's not going to do the.
I didn't know. Thing. I didn't know they were still a thing.
And Glenn Martin, go ahead, dude.
I was just going to say, Mark. Speaking of distilleries and with the world opening up, where would you like to go if there was a WhiskyCast travel fund and you could go and explore a region out there which you maybe don't know that well, or there's a lot going on? Where would you travel to now?
I have not yet been to Japan, and it pains me to say that. I have not been to Japan. Kurosawa Distillers had the groundbreaking for their new distillery this week, the successor to Kurosawa. I have not been to Japan. I would love to go. I've not been able to figure out how to get there yet, but that's on my bucket list. That would be the one place I really want to go. I want to go down to South Africa. I want to see what the guys at Distill's place at James Sedgwick are doing. Tabitha, I've been 5 times. Yeah, but you haven't been on the podcast yet, on the webcast yet, Tabitha. I kid, of course. On the marketing campaigns, Nurse Dave, I love Lefroy leaving bad comments about their scotch. Yeah. Pete Head, I simply do not get the expensive bottle thing. Great to leave it and sell it for others to drink. Get several bottles from that money and have several great experiences. Or have one superlative experience with that money.
If I had the money, I would happily track down a bottle of the Yamazaki 1984. And the only reason, there was a point where possibly I could have afforded it a long time ago. Not possible now. But that was the dram that I had at the Yamazaki distillery. Sorry, Mark. And it would always be trying to recapture that moment, that smell, that environment. And I would happily spend, I think they're like $10,000 a bottle now. And if I had that money just lying around the place, I would buy it and I would drink it and I would enjoy it.
No, you wouldn't, because your wife would never let you.
She was there with me. And
and she still would never let you.
if I was propping up this table with like £10 notes and it was that inconsequential, then maybe she'd let me. Maybe.
No,
not until I've drunk everything else.
Not happening. Not happening. Not happening. I've never spent more than $200 for a bottle of whiskey, and that's generous. And I'm just going, no, not happening. Hey, Shampoo, someday I want to try Johnny Walker Blue Label, but too many great things I want to try more. Okay. Email me your address, and I will send you a small sample of Johnny Walker Blue Label. I have some. And yes, it's good. But yeah, are you going to spend $180 for a bottle or whatever they charge for it at the bar? No. But Hemp Hill, you send me your address and I'll take care of you. If we can get it across borders, we'll figure out a way. We're having some comments here. I tried it, Chris. It's nice, but not the best Japanese whiskey I had, but nothing replaces the experience of trying it on site. So I believe you. Yamazaki Distillery was something else. Had Yamazaki 18 and 25 there.
One thing I do find, Mark, and I don't know if you get the same, but when I drink a whiskey from a distillery that I've been to, I find the sense memory is incredible. If I open an Ardbeg or a Bruichladdich, it just transports me in a way that I don't get with other whiskies. And I think that it's that holiday thing. You know, when you go on holiday and you drink the local booze or you eat something and then you come home and it isn't quite the same. But I think there is something very, very intoxicating about being so immersed in a whiskey. And then it lingers with you far, far longer than you think.
Yeah, I can see that. I will admit there are times that I'm influenced by the memories of having visited a distillery, but I just can't see. I try not to take that into account because because it's not fair to the distilleries I haven't been to.
Oh yeah, oh no, and I'm thinking entirely from just those moments personally where I wouldn't say that it was necessarily a better whiskey than it was, or it was worse whiskey, but just that first smell always just starts something in my head. And I one thing actually, talking of that, I had the opportunity to try let me get this right, the Johnny Walker Ghost and Rare Port Ellen edition.
Oh yeah, that was nice.
It was. I drank it out of a plastic cup in the front row of a university lecture hall at a computer event. The whiskey was very good. the surroundings did it no justice. It
Yeah.
was very much the opposite effect there.
But it's still, you don't turn that down.
Oh no. When that came out of somebody's bag, I had my biggest smile and my nicest small talk.
And Chris Tedzenko, who lives in Australia, points out next time we're over, we need to sit down for a few drams again. Absolutely, Chris. You and Lilith, standing invitation. When you get over this way, let me know. H.M. Hill, some people act like it's the nectar of the gods, but I suspect it is kind of status statement with the Johnny Walker Blue. I wouldn't go that far. It is a good whiskey. It's a great whiskey. It's very enjoyable.
Mm.
Is it the best whiskey ever created? I don't think so. But it's still a good one. Here's a good one from Tabitha. Any whiskey that people have hyped but you thought was mediocre? What have you tasted that was mediocre, that you thought was going to be good?
Oh, I'm a really bad person to ask for this because I'm generally quite optimistic and I tend to always look on the good side of things. I think my personal disappointments tended to be Jura, but I think that's more my taste than the whiskey itself. I'm honestly sorry. The one that probably disappointed me was the Yamazaki sherry cask. No, it wasn't. It was the Yamazaki peated. Just because I thought that sounds interesting and that sounds, good. And I just didn't get the flavors marrying up. I think sometimes peat and sweeter flavors don't always go very well together. And that one was a bit of a miss for me. What about you, Mark?
I'm trying to think of what I thought was mediocre. And really, because the whiskeys I get to try have been vetted by the whiskey makers before I get to try them, frankly. I very rarely ever try a mediocre whiskey, let alone a bad whiskey, because if it's bad, it never gets my way. I mean, I've tasted some that I thought were okay, meh, but they're still good whiskeys, but we're all subjective in our tastes. And what might be my meh would be your 98 pointer. It's all subjective. And I hate to go that far.
It reminds me of, I did a tasting with an English distillery where the whiskies were very young and the cask finishes they were doing were very, very bold. And there was one sample that everybody raved about. And in the tasting, the way that it had led up, it made sense. And it was good in that context. I tried it later without that context. And what I realized was that the spirit was still young. I can't remember if it was 3 years old or not.
Yeah.
And they'd put it into this really, really punchy cask. And the cask was overwhelming all of the spirit flavor. And it's, Mark, when you're editing a photo, you can turn the color way up. You can turn the contrast way up. And actually, when you step back, it's like putting too much salt in your food. You kind of step back and go,
Absolutely.
hang on. It kind of showed both the immaturity of the whiskey. It showed, I think, the immaturity of the maker. And I think that was one of the times when I think there's great whiskey. I think there's whiskey that you don't think twice about. And then you get the whiskey that's kind of disappointing. And that one actually disappointed me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, just to Tabitha's point there, I think English whiskey is, English whiskey is really stuck at the moment between trying to get whiskey out, trying to get product out, but it being young and the experience and the knowledge isn't there yet.
Yeah, there's only one distillery, English whiskey company, that really has the age to do good stuff. And even their stuff, occasionally, they'll put a stonker out occasionally once in a while.
Yeah. And I think that when you get... So one of the things, and Becky Paskin put this so much better than I could. So, you know, Mark, at Jim Beam, at the back of the still house, they've got all of the master distillers.
Yeah.
And you can see that over the dinner table, families for generations have just been talking about nothing else but whiskey. And even when they move to other distilleries in the region, it's all of that knowledge that goes with them. And then you look at the English whiskey scene, and there aren't really that many people who have that cultural knowledge, what Becky called the social terroir, where you know a guy over at the next farm who makes whiskey, so you bring him over to your farm and he tells you how to make whiskey.
Yep.
So I think give it 10 years, 20 years. I think there could be some really good English whiskey. But I think what we're seeing now is those first baby steps. And I think that's kind of interesting, but at the same time, to see those releases sell out, it just, I don't get it sometimes, to be honest.
And what we're not seeing is the credit to the consultants, like the late, great Dr. Jim Swan and other folks who have worked with these distilleries over the years to help them shape their whiskeys. We don't see that credit given that would help us put them in the proper context.
Yes, I definitely agree with that.
Well, let's see here. And as Tabitha points out, love Becky, another Brighton resident from Tabitha.
Anybody in the UK who's watching this or within shipping distance, the Your Whiskey Festival, Your Whiskey, Our Whiskey, I keep getting it wrong, Our Whiskey Festival this year.
Our Whiskey.
I think was genuinely some of the most interesting, creative, exciting sessions that I've seen. And it was tremendous fun. And I think her writing's brilliant and I love her to bits. I think she's great.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for Becky. She has taken more than her share of crap over the last year and a half since she raised hell about what he who shall not be named had been doing in his book that shall not be named. But I think she was spot on, and I have a lot of respect for Becky Paskin.
Definitely.
And let's just, there's no argument about that whatsoever. And let's see. Great comment from Whiskey Canuck. At a pre-pandemic tasting, a friend bought a Welsh whiskey. He was eager to try it because he liked another expression and was so disappointed because it had a penicillin note that he left the bottle at my place. Well, I think you got the better of that deal if he left it at your place.
If there's something that's really that funky, I remember once I had a bottle of something, it was Monkey Shoulder. It was just Monkey Shoulder blended whiskey. And it had this rubber note to it. And it was the only time I've ever sent a bottle of whiskey back. And if something seems that off, absolutely raise it with a distillery. Because if it's wrong, if it's an error, if you think this can't be right, it may well not be right.
Yeah, it could have very well been corked. There could have been cork taint to it. I've had that come up in tastings before. I had that happen in a Glen Rothes tasting with John Ramsey years ago, where I tasted this and I'm going, John, I'm getting cork on this. And they tasted it and they nosed it and they went, yeah, you're right. And they pulled the samples at a tasting.
Wow.
So I'm going, yeah, I mean, even the best whiskey makers put up a stinker once in a while. And we have to take that for what it is. It's just, it's a human process, and sometimes stuff happens.
Very true. So One last question, Mark. I realise that time's getting on. We've seen.
Oh, we've blown an hour and a half of everybody's time tonight that they'll never get back.
Hey,
so
I've still got this much of the bottle left, so I'm happy to keep.
Yeah,
going.
hey, we can.
So we've seen a lot of distilleries over the last 3 years opening. Is there one architecturally that you think you would either love to visit, you'd love to photograph, you think is just genius in the way that it's designed?
Yeah, I want to go see the new McAllen distillery. Malt Disney World, they've called it. It's been
beat me
called by
to it.
some people. I want to see this thing because it looks like a damn Teletubbies hill from the outside. But the photos that I've seen from the inside are absolutely stunning. I've not been able to get over there to see it yet. And I want to see this place because it looks really cool. And I like what they did, burying half of it underground. I just want to see the place for myself because I've seen pictures, but I know that pictures don't do it justice.
Or I saw one photo during one of the our whiskey sessions of the McMyra distillery, which I think that's the one where the whole process is vertical, isn't it?
Yeah, they start at the top because they have they bring the grain mills, they haul the grain all the way to the top, and then everything is vertically done so that gravity feeds the grain down through the mills, down into the malting process, down into the fermenting process, down into the stills. And then down at the bottom is where they fill it into the barrels. So they save a lot of energy that way.
Isn't it quite angular as well from the outside, sort of surrounded by pine trees?
No, it's straight up and down like a tower. It's almost like a still house that you would see at a distillery in Kentucky. It's just that everything is on one angle and it comes all the way straight down.
That's clever.
Yeah, it really is cool. The photo I have, and I can't show it to you right now, is of Angela Durazio, their master blender, with this circular or rectangular staircase going all the way down from the top floor all the way down to the bottom. And I've got her leaning over the edge as you see all the way down from the top of the distillery to the bottom.
Oh, fantastic. I can picture that. And Matt's saying in the comments, you should lead a Scottish whiskey trip.
We've talked about it, but there are people who do that for a living, and I would just hire it out to them. Because if I'm leading the trip, I want to be able to have fun and enjoy myself. And if I'm enjoying myself, I don't want to have to worry about you all on that trip. I want to be able to sit back, relax, and have a dram or two. Because if I'm worried about it, whether 40 people are happy with their rooms, happy with the breakfast, and on the bus, and everybody's comfortable in their seats and stuff, I'm not going to have fun. So I want to contract all that stuff out to somebody else who knows what they're doing. Let them do it. I want to sit back and relax and have a dram with y'all.
And those trips are a lot of work to organize.
Oh, yeah. And Tabitha, I plan to go to Inverness and Speyside at the end of August. Tabitha, I envy you. Because I would love to do that. Frank Scott, right on, Mark. Thank you, Frank. I'm still waiting to hear what you guys are planning for Fredericton at the end of November. I'm hoping to come up there. I hope you guys can have the festival. And I'm waiting to hear for word. Greg's Whiskey Guide. Honestly, I'd prefer to visit Cavalan. They know more about producing great sherried whiskey than contemporary Macallan, sorry to say. Greg, you would love the Cavalan Distillery. You would have a ball there. It would be right up your alley. Having been there a couple of times, yes, you would love that.
There was a comment from Tabitha saying that she's intrigued to see the Johnny Walker experience. And just building on that, Mark,
yeah,
there's a growing trend now for, I'm thinking, the Jim Beam Urban Still House in Louisville.
Which they have closed.
Has it gone completely now?
It closed during the pandemic because they're basically focusing all their efforts on the the new experience that they're building down in Claremont at the distillery right now. And then they will come back to Kentucky at a future point, or come back to Louisville rather, at a future point.
But between that, the Evan Williams experience, the Johnny Walker experience, what's your take on these big brand experience centers?
If it gets more people into whiskey, because what these are designed for, they're not designed for the whiskey nerds like us. They are designed for the traveling public, the conventioneers who are going to Louisville and want to go to the Evan Williams bourbon experience. They're designed for those folks to help encourage them to get into bourbon and get into whiskeys when they go to the Scotch whiskey experience in Edinburgh or visit one of the distilleries in Scotland. And if it drags more people into whiskey, that's great.
Very true. Although I did spot now that Islay now has daily flights from Edinburgh as well as Glasgow. So I wonder if anybody would take the morning flight out of Edinburgh, fly to Islay, visit a couple of distilleries, and then the 5 o'clock flight back to Edinburgh.
Oh, hell, that'll never happen because the winds will screw it up. No way. You can't plan for that because, yeah, you could try that, but it's never going to happen because the chances of your flight getting canceled and you getting to spend the night on Islay are better than you might think about when you schedule that trip.
Although I can think of worse places to be stranded.
Oh, yeah. 10 years ago this year, next month, or in September, I was stuck in Islay. I was over there for the Bruichladdich 10th anniversary celebration. And that was when the remnants of a hurricane that came up through the U.S. East Coast and came around and hit Scotland and hit Islay first, came through with waves and winds, and they canceled the ferries, they canceled the planes, and I got stuck on Islay for an extra day and a half.
Wow.
And God, that was fun. Because Mark Rainier was still running Bruichladdich back then, and he gave me the distillery's van and said, go ahead, go down to your bed and breakfast down in Port Nahaven, but go ahead and drive wherever you want and just leave it at the airport in Gleneagledale when you're done, when you get on your flight. And I did.
Fantastic.
And I got some wonderful photos over that 36 hours.
It's nearly 10 years ago that, if you look behind me, these prints are all Islay distilleries that I visited about 10 years ago. And they've been pride of place in my dining room ever since.
And yeah, I love Islay. I would live there in a heartbeat if I had reliable internet connections. Only because they don't have reliable power. The power goes out every so often because the winds knock the lines down. And the internet goes out every once in a while. But I would live on Islay in a heartbeat. I just love it there. It's a magical place.
The two things that Iliacs complain about, one is the ferries and two is the internet. And as far as I'm aware, they still have upcoming plans for better internet access, and it's been up and coming for years.
Oh, you want to try absolute hell on earth. 2010, I was over there for the Islay Festival. Trying to do a podcast every single day from every distillery.
Wow.
For 10 days. And depending on the Wi-Fi and the internet access from Islay and Jura, and I'm just going, God, please let this work. Please don't let this crash while I'm uploading the podcast.
The only thing worse than no internet is bad internet.
I mean, at times there were... Graham Fraser got stuck on Erin for 3 days in 2020. Many distillery visits. Graham, there were 2 distilleries on Erin. How many times did you visit the place? Okay, we've killed an hour and 35 minutes of time that no one is ever going to get back from this. I can't believe we went on this long. Chris, thank you for stepping in to help out and continue the crack and the conversation. Thank you, my friend, and
anytime.
Looking forward to your next report on WhiskyCast. And guys, we will hear from Nelson Eddy, the historian from Jack Daniels, on the next episode, coming up Sunday night, Monday morning, depending on which time zone you're in. Thank you for joining us. I promise we will do better next week. We will have a guest next week, a real guest who makes whiskey, not putting Chris down, but a real guest who makes real whiskey, and we'll talk about that next week here on the Happy Hour Live webcast. Until we meet again, I'm Mark Gillespie. Sláinte.